the first substantial number of Chinese to come to the United States came for the California Gold Rush in 1849, and then to work on the railroads that were being built. Most of them came from Guangdong, many from the Pearl River Delta. And their restaurants were originally to serve other members of the immigrant community. But Americans have been really for a long time, since after the American Civil War, partial to, fond of the cuisine of other countries, and none more than Chinese food. So many restaurants were opened in the late 19th century, and they served not the Chinese immigrant community, which was relatively small. You could make more money by adapting Chinese cuisine to American tastes. The fact that Chinese food was very popular really as far back as 1880. It was the most popular foreign cuisine or immigrant cuisine in the United States, and remains that way today. But its popularity doesn't mean that the people who made it were treated particularly well. So in California particularly, it coincided with harsh anti-immigration laws and labor laws, beginning with the so-called Chinese Exclusion Acts of the 1880s. And these partly discriminated against Chinese in things like industrial work or retail work, so that many Chinese went into the food business, not because they loved restaurants or loved foods, but because that was one of the relatively few occupations open to them. Mm-hmm. The most popular dish adapted to the United States was a dish called chop suey, which your listeners may or may not be familiar with. It dominated American Chinese food for the really first half of the 20th century. And it's an adaptation of a Pearl River Delta dish that was originally stir-fried and originally involved giblets and other organ meat. But in its American version, it was sort of a thick sauce like gravy and mixed chopped up vegetables and meat. I don't think so. It's not that I minimize the anti-Asian sentiment or the peculiar and disturbing trends in American politics. But as I said, the cuisine can be popular even if the people are being discriminated against. So I think that Chinese restaurants were singled out at the beginning of the COVID epidemic 2 years ago, but I don't think that sentiment has lasted. I don't think that's going to be so very important. Well, for myself personally, authenticity is very important, but I recognize that people play games with authenticity. So they think that something is very authentic. When chop suey went out of fashion in the 1970s, Sichuan food and the food of Hunan, very spicy food, became popular and seemed very authentic. But some dishes like General Tso's chicken that came in at this time, obviously are not authentic, but people like them anyway. So there's always a game being played between authentic. There's certain things that Americans don't like, at least, at the moment. They don't like organ meat. They don't like sea cucumber. They don't like sort of chewy, tough things, or things that at least they perceive to be that way. And so there's a limited amount. What the ideal compromise is something that seems authentic, that's marketed as authentic, but that conforms to American taste. So for example, Americans now like spicy food. So things like, noodles with cumin and lamb from Western China. That's very popular. But yeah, there are a lot of things that Americans don't, Americans don't really like sour foods, so that the so-called sweet and sour products sold here are sweet and would scandalize people familiar with the authentic versions in China.